episode of Elevate with Ankara, I'm bringing you the very first completed garment in the series. But first, if you're new to my channel, welcome. And if you're a returning person, thank you so much for your continued support. All right, let's get into it. If you're new to the series, Elevate with Ankara is a series that I've put together with Talisha of Creativity by T here on YouTube, and we will be sharing some images on Instagram. This series was put together to encourage all of our sewing friends to try sewing with Ankara fabric. We have decided that we are going to take some basic patterns and show you how you can really elevate those patterns by using really cool prints using Ankara fabric. Now, this very first garment in the series is a button-up top, and we revealed that in our video on December 6th. So in that video, we gave several different suggested patterns that you could use to really elevate using Ankara fabric. And so we finally completed our garments, and I'm so excited to talk to you about the garment that I have made. After you watch this video, head over to Talisha's channel and check out the garment that she completed. Now, in this series so far, we have had an introductory video to the series. We have done an interview with CJ of House of Mami Wata, which I highly encourage you watch so that you can learn some additional information about Ankara fabric, how to use it, how it's sourced, where you can find some amazing prints. And also there is a discount code so that you can get some free fabric with your purchase through that store in that video. Information for that video will be linked below in the information section of this video. So today's video, I'm actually revealing to you the completed garment, which I'm wearing right now. So you'll be able to see it as I talk about it, okay? So based off of the suggestions that I gave you in the previous video, I selected one of those patterns. However, it was extremely difficult for me to narrow it down and pick the one that I thought might be perfect for my wardrobe. After lots of debating, I finally settled on the Ashling Blouse by Papercut Patterns, and this is what the pattern looks like. It's a really great pattern. I love this pattern because it comes with two different blouse versions as well as two different dress versions for this pattern. Now, you can do a standard collar with a rounded curve, which I did here and I love, and it definitely has a collar stand, so it's a traditional collar. Or you can do one that has this really cool pleated detail, which is very similar to the sleeve of this blouse, but it would stand up around the neck. And I can tell you, based off of how these cuffs came together, that that collar would stand up so nice and straight and cool if you wanted to do that version. And it might be something that I'll do in the future, because after seeing how this fabric worked so well with this pattern, I absolutely can envision that a collar would be amazing in Ankara fabric for this pattern. So that is a wonderful option. For the shirt, you have the option of doing a full-length long shirt or doing a cropped shirt, and I chose to do the cropped version. The cropped version hits me at the high hip, which is perfect for me. I have a short torso, and generally when I make cropped things, assuming that it fits me well in the bust, my cropped versions of my tops will generally stop at the top of my jeans, which is exactly where I want it to stop. The bottom of this cropped version has a really great option to do a ruffle. Now, I personally don't get down with a ton of gathers. I make things with gathers all the time, but it's definitely a headache. And when I saw how long the piece of fabric was that I would have to gather, I decided I couldn't do it. So for my version, I did something a little different to create my ruffle on the bottom, and I'll talk to you about that a little later. Let's talk about the things that you'll need to make this top. You will need a light to medium woven fabric like cotton, linen, silk, rayon, or blends. You will need fusing, so interfacing. You will need buttons, and I personally chose to do the 3/8 inch buttons, and I purchased them through Amazon, and there is 7 buttons on my version, which is the cropped version. Now, in this particular pattern, you will need, let's see how much fabric you're going to need. For the cropped blouse, you're going to need about 2 yards of fabric. So that's very important to note. And it's definitely, since it's cropped, you're not going to have the full length blouse version. However, I think it will determine how wide your fabric is. My fabric, since it's Ankara fabric, was 45 inches wide. However, I did have to get creative about how I cut the pieces for my ruffle on the bottom of my blouse. So you might have to do a little pattern Tetris. So if you're going to make this blouse, I encourage you to do a little over 2 yards of fabric. Let's talk about the pattern pieces for this pattern. You need a front, a back yoke, a sleeve. You need the waist frill. You need the collar stand, the upper collar, the sleeve cuff, the cuff frill, and that's just to make the cropped version of the blouse. That's 8 pattern pieces. This particular pattern, I would say, is an intermediate pattern. I don't see that here in the instructions what it's rated, but I do know that you have to have basic knowledge of sewing. You have to be able to create a button placket, which this particular one is nice because it's included in the front pattern pieces for the blouse. You don't have to actually sew on a button placket. All you have to do is interface the front edge of each front piece, and then you're going to iron it over twice to create the button placket. That's very nice and makes the process so easy. All of the pattern pieces came together really nicely and perfectly, I will say. One thing that is challenging for me in my brain is that this particular pattern has a different measurement system. So instead of doing 3/8 of an inch seam allowance or 5/8 inch of a seam allowance, it is in centimeters and less than a centimeter measurements, which is very difficult to pinpoint on your sewing machine if it's not already marked on there. So I definitely encourage you to take a little ruler and to mark on your sewing machine where these different seam allowance points are on your sewing machine so that you don't make any mistakes. I personally did a good job, although I was very nervous all the way through and praying that I used the correct seam allowance measurement for each of the different seams. Definitely pay attention to the instructions. Do not sew this based off of the pictures. You could, but you might miss some of those measurements because they change throughout the pattern. So, I mean, anyone could really make this pattern, but you definitely need to know how to create a buttonhole, sew on buttons, and have some patience, okay? There is a lot of pressing involved in this pattern, which is okay with me. So don't rush it. I personally sewed this up last night, okay? Which was really challenging for my brain. I sewed until 1 in the morning. But once I was completed, I felt really accomplished and everything came together so very nicely. There is something that I wish would have been different, and that would be how the back yokes are sewn on. This is not done by the burrito method, which surprised me because I've sewn other paper cut patterns that actually use the burrito method. So I found it interesting how they actually put on the yokes for this blouse. It's totally okay. It's very easy the way that they have you install it, whereas the burrito method is slightly more complicated but gives a nicer finish. That is something that you can probably do on your own if you know how to use that method. All in all, I would say that this was a really enjoyable sew. There are some very unique details about this pattern that really make it stand out. One is kind of a small detail, but I think it actually is nice because it's different from all of the other type of button-up tops that I've made in the past. And that is that the yokes themselves are actually rather small. I'll turn around so that you can see what they look like. So as you can see, they actually stop pretty high up on the pattern, right up here, not too far down from the collar. And then you have the center gathers here to pull it in the back of the yoke. So that's what that looks like. I think that's a very neat look. One of the things I like about the fact that I used Ankara fabric for this pattern is that it gives a belled shape when I move. I'm gonna stand up so that you can see. Let me step back so you can see what I'm talking about. But when I move, it keeps its structure and its shape, so it's almost like a bell. Another thing that's interesting about the pattern that I didn't anticipate is that this ruffle piece is extremely long, and what they want you to do is actually create gathers and gather it to match the bottom of the blouse. I had a big issue with that because I knew I would be sitting here until 5 o'clock in the morning trying to gather. So I first tried my trick where I put elastic thread in the bobbin of my sewing machine and sew it that way, and then the fabric just gathers on its own. However, with my new sewing machine, I couldn't figure out the right adjustments to make it gather. So I actually ended up saying, to heck with this, I don't have the patience to deal with this, and I pleated the bottom of my blouse. So I created about 1-inch pleats all the way around the bottom of the blouse in order to create this ruffle on the bottom. Actually, let me stand up so that you can really see it. So if you look, there are nice pleats all around the bottom of the blouse. And so that's how I chose to finish off my blouse rather than using the gathers to create the ruffle at the bottom of the blouse. Okay. I would say that this pattern would take someone about 3 hours to sew, and that is if you are using a gathering foot on your sewing machine, and if you are using a little foot on your sewing machine that allows you to sew buttons on. Sewing by hand and pleating by hand definitely takes a lot of time. So if you don't have time to crank it out in a slow Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, then I definitely would recommend that you break this project up over several days, because there are lots of details that require pleating and patience. Something about this pattern that I actually found a bit frustrating was creating the sleeve placket, and I'm coming close so that you can see what mine looks like. Mine is, I'm not sure if it's done correctly, to be perfectly honest. I think it looks really nice, but there is this shape here at the bottom that makes me think that maybe it could be cleaner, and it's possible that I didn't do something correct because it bunches about here. But honestly, because of how gathered the sleeves are, it just looks like it's a part of the design, and it's really not a big deal. But I would say that was probably the most complicated thing about this whole pattern, was completing the sleeve packet and the actual sleeve cuff itself. Once it was done, I was like, this is the most beautiful sleeve I've ever created or worn. So it was worth the head scratching moments when I wasn't sure if I was doing something correctly. My recommendation is to just take your time and reread the instructions over and over again if you don't understand it. All in all, I really love the way this blouse came out. It was definitely an enjoyable sew, and I could see myself making the dress version, which is pictured here on the front of the pattern. And I know now that my go-to for this particular pattern is going to be a type of cotton, in order to keep some of these beautiful details and puffiness of the sleeves and the crisp, perfect pleats on the sleeve cuffs and on the hem of the blouse. I don't know what this would look like in maybe a rayon challis. It would probably be more soft and the pleats would be less pronounced. They would probably be more flowy. If that's a look that you're going for, I would probably omit this bottom ruffle on the blouse as well as the dress version, because I don't think it would hold that crisp shape like it does in a cotton. I highly recommend this pattern. I think it's gorgeous, and I definitely plan on making the dress version of this. And I think my go-to will be a cotton, because I just absolutely love the way these pleats turned out and how puffy the sleeves are and how it holds its shape. Now the size range on this is a size 1 to a size 8. A size 1 has a 29.9 bust, a 22 waist, and a 32.3 hip. And the size 8 is a 46.5 bust, a 38.6 waist, and a 48.8 hip. I think that's a pretty good size range. It definitely could be better, but for the amount of pieces and variation that come in this particular pattern, I'd say that this is definitely a good pattern for a lot of bodies. I love that it has so much ease and that it's so wide. I did not have to do a full bust adjustment, which is something that I often have to do, so I appreciate that. And I can tell you that I made a size 5 in this pattern, and I think it fits me really nicely. Now the sleeve cap is here And technically, I think it's supposed to be over a little bit more, but that's okay with me. I think it fits really comfortable and it looks really nice on my body. I'm going to insert some pictures so that you can get a close-up look of what this pattern looks like on me. I did start out taking pictures in this new setup here with my backdrop and these box lights, and I didn't know if I liked those very much, so I went back to my comfort zone and I went outside and took some pictures in some natural light for you, and you'll be able to see how the shirt actually holds its shape as I move in it. And I really do love this blouse. I think that using this Ankara fabric definitely elevated this pattern as I hoped it would. And I could see myself making this out of so many different prints and it still being a knockout in my closet, and no matter what print that I made it in. I definitely want to make a crisp white version and maybe a black version as well, just to have some nice staples. But I thought it would be really cool to wear this blouse with a basic colored cardigan or even like a sweater vest on top, so that these awesome sleeves and the collar are the shine of the show, okay? So I really love this pattern. I love this blouse. I think it came together so nicely, and I hope that you enjoy the way it came out as well. Now remember, if you haven't already watched the other episodes in the series, I highly encourage you to check out the playlist in the information section of this video so that you can see the other videos that we have posted. Also, I want you to head over to Talisha of Creativity by T's channel to see her blouse, her button up top, and see which pattern she selected and which fabric that she selected. I'm sure it's going to be very inspiring and beautiful. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please tune in on our channels, because on January the 10th, we will be having our next episode. And in that episode, we will be revealing the next garment in the series. So if you enjoyed seeing this button-up blouse, I know you're going to enjoy that video as well. And just like the format for the month of December, that video will be an introduction to the garment type. And then I'll be giving you, and she will be giving you, some pattern suggestions that we think would be really great to be made out of Ankara fabric. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It definitely helps my channel out a lot. Thank you so much for checking this video out. I hope you have a fantastic day and a wonderful week and a happy holidays. Bye.